Hello, Bobcats. I'm Simran Puri, and welcome to GC360's Cat Talk, where we highlight a major news maker from around GCSU, Milledgeville, and globally. Our goal is to dig deeper into some of the topical issues that are shaping life here at Georgia College. This year is the university's radio station, WGUR 95.3's 50th birthday. To celebrate, we're going to take a look in the past and see its creation and into the present day to see how it's grown. Today we have special guests, the founder of WGUR, Dr. Frank Howell, and first operational manager, Greg Duckworth. Welcome.
Glad to be here today, Sam.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for coming. So just very quickly, could we get a brief introduction of who you guys are and what position you guys hold today?
Yeah. Well, you can just call me Greg.
Okay.
Greg Duckworth, and Greg will be fine. I started here fall of 71, graduated in May of 75. But I had started on my master's degree early 75, but I didn't graduate with my MED until 1979. But I wasn't here the entire time. I was just here 1 year with the radio station. I actually was a teacher, my school teacher for 3 years.
Okay.
And then I went into pharmaceutical sales, and we were living in the Atlanta area at that point in time. So I had like a 34-year career with that. And then it was time to retire, and I've been enjoying. I actually volunteered at the Georgia Aquarium, and actually built up enough hours to where I could actually MC and talk about the animals. That was so much fun.
That sounds fun.
And after that, I've just been at home playing my guitars and listening to music and being a kid again. So
I love that. Releasing your inner child. That's sweet.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, I'm Frank Howell. People don't call me doctor anymore since I'm a professor emeritus, but I appreciate that title. I'm also adjunct professor at Emory University still. I don't teach for them anymore, but they count publications. I began here when Greg did in the fall of 71 and graduated in 75. I was news director and helped found WXLX, a commercial AM daytimer on the Lake Laurel Road. And I was doing that a little bit and working with, we were waiting for the FCC to act on our FCC application during that time. And I got the call to go to graduate school at Mississippi State. And so it turns out that I left Milledgeville and moved to Starkville 2 weeks before we got approval, and Greg flipped the switch and turned the station on. So Simran, today, thanks to Kellen O'Neill, I was on mic in the station I founded 50 years ago for the first time, just before this interview.
About an hour
Wow.
ago. So, yeah.
Wow. How did that feel being on air?
Well,
for the first time?
it was wonderful, and I appreciate Kellen's sensitivity to that and in offering that to me. But I spent a career as a college professor first at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth and NC State in Raleigh, and came back to Mississippi State on leave, and they made me an offer I didn't refuse, which was to become a faculty member there and to rebuild a research center. And I spent the rest of my career as a professor there. And the chancellor at the University System of Georgia in Atlanta recruited me. He knew I could retire, and so I worked for about 3 years in research and policy analysis at the Board of Regents. And one of the current administrators at Georgia College, Dr. Chris Furland, who's in institutional research, he worked with me there. And so you've hired a great person in your institutional research department, and Chris is just superb. So I am retired. I am an amateur radio operator and operate a couple of blogs, k4fmh.com and foxmikehotel.com. And I do the social science of amateur radio. I study that. I work a lot with emergency communications. I'm a certified storm spotter and all those good things. I took the advice of someone, don't retire from something, retire to something. And so I have an RF workbench. I build and design antennas. And I'm like Greg, I'm being a kid again, because I used to do that kind of stuff when I was a kid. So life is fun, and every day I try to find something to do that makes somebody else's life better. And that makes mine better.
I love to hear it. That seems so fun, just being like a kid again. So let's just delve back into the past. How did you guys meet?
I don't really remember.
Well, we entered school here, and it's not that big of a campus, so I don't know if we had classes together, Greg. I just don't remember.
That's what I was thinking. Probably, we took that journalism class together.
Yes, we did.
When we were juniors, and that was the first time that a journalism class was offered.
Oh,
and it was
wow.
only one class. That was the only journalism taught.
And it's way different now. It's like a full
yes.
Incredibly
concentration.
different.
There was
Yeah.
not a degree in journalism, or
wow.
there was no communications degrees or anything like that.
Wow.
But we knew one another before then. I think we were actually rooming together at that point in time.
Okay.
So maybe before that, the year or two before, we may have had another
Yeah.
class together.
And we ran into one another, and really, you worked at the union, I worked at the union.
That was
I'm sure
probably
we
it.
got
Which
to
is
know each
now
other
the
then.
Max, right?
That's right.
The
Yeah.
cafeteria, yeah.
And Greg was on Colonnade, the newspaper, and I probably wrote for some for the
You
Colonnade. I may
did,
have done
yeah.
some. I worked on the student yearbook. So if you're in the Max, as you guys call it now, it's not that large a building. So I'm sure Greg and I ran
Yeah,
into each other
yeah.
then. So that's probably how we met.
Right.
So
So why radio? Like what from your guys' relationship, like what sparked the idea of bringing a radio station to Milledgeville, like something that's never been done before?
Well, there was a commercial station, WMVG, but it was mostly country music and not something that students here listen to, or at least many of them. And so that may be a question for me. I was a freshman, and I was in the basement of Atkinson Hall,
Okay.
and that was the lunchroom. That was before the Max was built. It was under construction. And one of the little older students, Keith Jones, who later became student body president, and I were sitting down. And it was the case then, and as I verified when I was at the Board of Regents and did research like this for the board, the 75% of all first-time freshmen at Georgia College, guess where they come from? The 20-county Atlanta area. And so what did they do on the weekends? They went home. And so Keith was saying, we've got to do something to have opportunities for people to be here. And he said, what do you think? I said, we need a radio station. WREK at Georgia Tech and Georgia State and Valdosta. Oh, and he laughed at it. That's not going to keep anybody here. Well, I didn't laugh. And that provided a spark for me. And I had always been somebody interested in radio, listening to distant AM stations at night, was into CB radio and things like that. Simran. So that was how the idea got started, was when I was a freshman. And it was kind of maybe a gargantuan task in retrospect. But one of the things I learned, Simran, and I took it to heart when I was a professor, don't ever tell an undergraduate anything's hard because they play well above their punching weight. If you just don't tell them it's hard. Graduate student, that's fair game to tell them, hey, this is going to be a task. So that's how it got started. That's how the idea got started.
So you mentioned that you got laughed at. One of my follow-up questions is, how was faculty and staff and students reaction to obviously you said some people didn't agree with the radio station or just thought it was
well, there
a joke.
were students that laughed at the idea of one. I mean, they would just listen to commercial radio. And so there were a few people. One was a student named Bill Perry. I think Bill was maybe a year ahead of us.
Right.
Yeah. And Bill was from Macon. And I lived on Clark Street in a little square-looking building with double porches by the yellow brick building right across from Park South. And I called it a Roach Palace, but it was cheap and, I could afford the rent. Bill lived in a lower apartment there, and he had a scanner in his 1968 Pontiac. And I'm sure he got to know the police in Gray, Georgia very well by going through there at a high rate of speed. So he had a scanner, so he liked radio. And Bill Perry joined me, and we went to the Dean of Students. I was probably working in the union at that time, and the person who ran that was an assistant dean, okay? And her name was Harriet Donahue, wonderful lady. Had the hairdo from the 1940s, that my mother had, for example, if it give you a sense of that. Carolyn Geddes was a dean, and she championed the idea. And she said, look, I believe you. I think it's a good idea. Let's go visit some other stations. So Bill Perry and Dean Geddes and I went to Atlanta to visit WREK at Georgia Tech. I don't remember the call sign at Georgia State, and I'm not sure there's still a student station. They might be. We visited there because they're just there in Midtown. And then we also went to WVVS in Valdosta. The manager at WVVS in Valdosta had this incredible radio voice, He later became the voice of the superstation in Atlanta, WTBS, for Ted Turner. He was the voice of WTBS and CNN before Darth Vader, James Earl Jones, was hired to do that voiceover. So we made those trips, and Bill was kind of a key person with me there in getting that going. But we knew it was going to be a tough road, and the other person who got involved was not against radio, but radio wasn't his thing, and it was a guy from Milledgeville named Roy Lane. Roy was our age, came in when we did. He was interested in politics and public administration. And Roy went to Baldwin High School, and he played basketball. And I played basketball for Washington County High School. And we played against each other, and we would get matched up. And I will say, I burned him for 26 points one night with 2-point shots. And when I met Roy over here, I wasn't sure he'd be friendly, but we became fast friends. And Roy and I, he looked at the radio station. He said, look, I'm going to run to be student body president. But to get this done, let's figure out how we can get the money. We had a lovable comptroller named Bill Edens. And he was of an earlier day. And it was hard to get him to approve the expenditure of student activity money, even though students were required to pay it for the use by student groups. So Roy and I figured out that we need to look at the mechanism of how that money was allocated. And there was a 7 and 7 committee, 7 students, 7 faculty or administrators. Well, there was a tie, it went to faculty administrators. So Roy and I got 2 faculty. They were untenured. And later, when I became a faculty member, I realized how dangerous that might be for an untenured faculty member to vote differently than administration wanted.
Yep.
Wayne Byram in sociology and Bill Childers in geography, they agreed because they thought student money ought to be spent on students. And so we block voted and we outvoted them. And so we got over $5,000 allocated for the radio station. And that was the monumental step to then get the money secured to buy the equipment, because to apply to the FCC, you had to swear, testify legally that you have the resources to build the station you're applying for, right? And so we got about the business of doing the application, and had to get the university to get a plane to fly over and do an aerial photograph of where it was going to be, because that was required. And so we got that done, and that got submitted. Now, Greg was involved at that time as we were trying to rally the troops, and we had a group of would-be DJs. We had no station, but I'm going to let Greg pick it up from here and talk about what sounds terribly lame by today's standards, the Maxwell mouth.
Yeah, actually, Frank invented the concept of the Maxwell mouth, and it was actually, and he did it for a while.
And that's the Maxwell mouth is over the intercom system.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Frank got that started, and then I
And
picked
Harriet
up and
Donahue
continued.
allowed us to do it because she was in charge of
Student activities.
Maxwell.
Maxwell College
Yeah.
Union. Yeah. So it was Maxwell Mouth because it was Maxwell College Union. So I think it was primarily, mostly during the lunch hours, like between 11 and 1, that I'm not sure it would be somebody at the desk, the student activities desk, that would turn off the switch where we had cable. And I think at that time they were broadcasting 96 Rock in Atlanta, WKLS, which had gone on air exactly a year before we did. So that would be unhooked, and then our mic and our setup, which was in one of the rooms there on the bottom floor. And Frank had built a studio there, and so I was kind of like training. So all of us, the students that were planning on becoming DJs, we each had a day that we would go in there for an hour, maybe 2 hours during lunchtime, and we would actually broadcast just like we were at a regular radio station. Most of the news was from the Colonnade. We didn't have any national news or anything like that. And I'll have to say that a good portion of it was playing music, and just talking about upcoming events. Harriet Donahue, she would give us some information that we could share and things like that. And that occurred, I'm thinking it was probably 2 quarters. You know, we were on the quarter system then. So it was probably most of winter quarter and then all of spring quarter. And then it was not operable during the summer. So, and during that time, the students that were planning on being DJs, they were supposed to be studying for their exam. At that time, the FCC required for people that wanted to become DJs to take a test.
So how were all of this, like the process to get started, all of the legal stuff with the FCC and all that, how was the challenges after you got the Maxwell Mouth started and all of that? Like, what were the challenges like after you got it all started?
You know the biggest one, if I can say this, you know what the biggest complaint we had from students? They wanted to watch a soap opera called All My Children and Erica Perry. It came
At
on
1 o'clock or
at
something
1
like
o'clock,
that.
and so they wanted us to shut up so they could watch the soap opera. So we shut her down at 1
Yeah.
o'clock to make them happy.
That's a
Think
good
that
point.
was that was a challenge we had. Kind of
Yeah.
funny, right? But still, that was a
Was that the
practical-
biggest one?
Well, I don't remember
Yeah.
super challenge. I mean, motivating people to come do things
To come
and,
see
it.
and work on.
Right.
There's a
And-
great picture of Greg in the Maxwell Mouth that will be at our reunion tonight in the Pat Peterson Educational. And it may be, it's on our Facebook group, but it's a great picture of Greg
So-
playing music.
This leads me actually to 2 follow-up questions. The Maxwell Mouth, you said that you guys had it over the intercom system. How did you guys recruit like that, those hosts and that team to be a part of the Maxwell Mouth? And then also talking about the FCC and all of the legal processes you have to do, like the aerial view, was that a shock, like hearing all the steps that you had to take? And like, did you ever feel like, I can't do this, like that's just too much, like the legal process of it?
You want to handle
That
the
was
Maxwell
all-
Mouth? You want to handle the mouth part, and I'll do the application.
Yeah,
How's
you
that?
start. I think you've got the more challenging. So why don't you start there?
The
with,
application was something, and Simran, I don't know, maybe it's my personality, but I didn't let things like that intimidate me. And I'd go read, I'd go to the library. Charles Beard, who was the director of the library, was also one of our champions. I don't know if we had one of these while we did the Maxwell Mouth, but he donated 2 professional Reeboks tape decks from the library to the radio stations, so we would have some, because we didn't have some. And so Charles Beard was a champion, and I know going over to the library, he would help me look up things. Of course, we didn't have the internet then, and you know, he would help me find how do you do this, and I remember making some calls, long distance calls to the Atlanta office to just get information about this. So I sort of took that challenge on, and they sent us an application, and that was in the days of typewriters and stuff, and we made some copies because, you know, and I would go try to fill things out, and I'd have to go talk to physical plant, and you'd have to go get, I mean, it was a lot of work, and they would not have listened to me if the Dean of Students wasn't behind it. I mean, to be honest, she was our champion, and really, Bill Fogarty, who was a young assistant dean, he had played baseball here at Georgia College back when he was a student before he joined as an assistant dean. He later became a pastor, and I've had contact with him in recent years. One wonderful person. But the Dean of Students championing some students who had an idea that they thought, hey, this is neat, and it will build a community. So think about what you now call student engagement, what Dan Nadler does, what his job is, at managing organizations. That's what I call the hidden curriculum. You take courses and you learn from the courses you take. But jobs like what you're doing right now, what are you learning by being involved in the TV program? And Greg and I don't know if you've ever thought of it this way, I learned so much outside the classroom from doing this kind of thing. So it was a challenge. The biggest term paper that I wrote, I can assure you, was that FCC application.
Yeah.
But that was what that was about. Greg, the stuff on the training, you had a
recruiting the
hand in
host.
that.
Yeah, training really was not too much of an issue as far as a challenge. You know, I think Maxwell Mouth was a great idea that Frank came up with, but it was that ran very smoothly. I was constantly reminding all the other students, you know, in addition to this, you've got to get a license to a third-class license in order to be a DJ at the radio station. And we didn't know exactly when we were going to get our permit to actually start broadcasting. We had no idea.
Yeah.
We were hoping it would be before fall quarter 75 started, but we didn't really know. So I kept telling them, all of them, I said, you've got to go to Atlanta, you've got to get the manual, you've got to study it, you've got to take a test at the FCC office in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I had gotten my license in March. I was one of the first ones. But by, the end of spring quarter, there were only like 2 other students that I can remember. It might have been 3 that actually had gotten their license.
I got mine because I was working at WXLX, and I had the same requirement. And so I actually went to Atlanta and got mine, but to work at a commercial station here on Lake Laurel Road. So count me in that.
Exactly. So there were like 3,
Yeah.
including Frank. And I hate to really use numbers because 50 years ago it's really hard to remember exactly how many. But I knew that it wasn't the bulk of the people that were doing that. And I just said, school's going to be ending soon. We have no way to communicate during the summer. I said, promise me
You'll do it.
that you
Promise
will
you'll
do
get the
this during the
license.
summer, and when we can reconvene fall quarter
Yeah.
75, you will have received your license. Well, we received our broadcast license for the station, not for our own, but August the 27th of 1975.
Wow.
We had to go back and look that up in old
Yeah.
FCC records to see when that was issued.
Wow.
And we found that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the Associate Dean of Students, Bill Fogarty, he had been our faculty advisor during the building of this. And he called me. I was at home, and this was between school sessions, second summer session, and the beginning of fall quarter. So school was out during that time. And he called me and he said, well, you've got your license. You want to come over and see your radio station? Because they had been working on it throughout the summer. I mean,
yeah.
physically building some
Yeah.
things. And he said, come on over. And so I went like the next day. First time that I actually had been in the real radio station, and that was on the 3rd floor in Maxwell, over in Mayfair Hall.
Yeah.
And so I flipped the switch there, but my audience was him standing behind me, and then Dean of Students, Carolyn Geddes, was at her home. And so kind of a funny story, and I'll be quick about it. Even though I had some training, I was excited, but I was also, I guess, scared in a way. Like, it was just kind of a funny feeling to know that the audience were 2 of the most important people on campus, And I started playing music, and after I played 2 or 3 songs, and Dr. Fogarty said, aren't you going to say something? So then I started to talk. I don't remember what I said.
That kind of brings me to my next question. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so this will be my last question. But what advice, you're saying, like you said that you were excited but nervous, so what advice do you guys have for any current DJ host or anyone who's looking to get into radio or start a radio station or anything like that?
I think one of the important things would be, of course, what you have now is education. You have a degree. The students have a background. They have taken courses. They've done internships, so they already know a lot of that. We didn't have any of that, so we had a big learning curve. So what I would recommend to students today is that are going to go that way into mass communications is just learn everything that you can and be prepared, but also keep a mind that it can be fun. To know that you're important and you're actually speaking to a total body of students. You're another route of communication for the campus, a very important one. And I had a blast. It was a lot of fun. We did have some challenges. So the biggest challenge was music, the type of music being played. But that was a problem almost every year because different genre of music and so many students. And we were not supposed to be a pop station, pop rock, soft rock. We were more to be just regular rock, and what you call album-oriented rock, deep cuts. And so, we call a lot of, I won't say problems, but just certain students, not liking that because they wanted to listen to
A
pop.
different genre, yeah.
Yeah, and of course our comeback was, well, you've got WMAZ in Macon that you can get all the pop you want.
Their slogan was solid gold,
Yeah.
and that's all they played was top 40.
Yeah.
What would your advice be?
Well, here's my advice. I agree with everything Greg said, but let me add this. To work in radio and to communicate, and I had the experience at WXLX. Glad today I actually got on WGUR. To work in radio will change you as a person, because once you do, you can speak to anyone and you can speak to any group, and you don't have that fear of being able to communicate and talk. And I was a very, very shy child, very much. I got out of it when I played high school basketball in front of a lot of crowds. But when I worked in radio and I knew there was 10,000 people listening to my morning news at WXLX 1060 News, I went to the dentist to get my teeth cleaned, they would say something like, I hear you on whatever. And it's not as much ego, I mean, there's a little of that, but there's not as ego, but it confirms that you can communicate to anyone about anything. That's a valuable skill, Simran.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely agree.
Yeah, I would like to add one more thing.
Yes.
We were, when we first went on the air, and the Dean of Students, Carolyn Geddes, I remember her calling me into her office one day shortly after we had started broadcasting, and I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? And she just said, y'all are doing a fine job, but I just want to remind you of a few things to share with your team of DJs, which was very small at that point in time in the beginning. She said, remember to follow your FCC rules and guidelines. Of course, we knew that. But she also said, this is not a toy. This is where money has been spent for communications, so treat it with respect.
Yeah.
And also, the usual campus rules, no smoking, no drinking, partying, anything like that. But the take home with that, as she also said, is don't be biased on anything that you say. Particularly anything when it came to news. Just state the facts, don't share your opinion. And I think that was a big take home for everybody is when you're talking, just talk about what you're supposed to talk about. And that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out here today and speaking with us.
Thank you, Simran. It's a real honor to be here.
It's a pleasure to have y'all.
Yeah, we've enjoyed it.
On behalf of Georgia College and the whole GC360 team, we really thank you and appreciate you. After this short break, I'll be interviewing the executive board of WGUR, the current executive board, and we'll see what the present and the future holds for the rest of the radio.
Hi Bobcats! Looking for your next adventure? Consider Georgia Writers Museum as your must-visit destination this fall. Located 21 miles from campus in historic downtown Eatonton, Georgia Writers Museum is a place dedicated to inspiring today's writers and readers. Walk through exhibits on Georgia's authors, browse our bookstore selection of gifts and merchandise, or relax with a sweet treat at Sylvia's Coffee. Want a more hands-on experience? Join us this fall for events such as Haunting Eatonton, Crime and Wine, and more. Whether it's for education or leisure, Georgia Writers Museum is the place for you. Learn more at georgiawritersmuseum.org. Go Bobcats!
Welcome back to GC360 News. We just heard from the creators of WGUR about how it all started. Now let's check in with the current team to see how they've carried that legacy forward. Welcome, we're so happy to have you guys. So just really quickly, what's a brief introduction of the position you hold right now, and what drew you to radio, why WGUR?
Hi, I'm Gabe Wade. I'm the news director for WGUR, and I actually did the news director as my practicum fall of 2024, and the previous news director, Ethan Mullenauer, recommended the position for me after he graduated. So that's how I got into it, and I've enjoyed it a lot since.
Hey, I'm Logan Resch. I'm the programming director. And my sister actually was doing radio at UGA, WUOG, and she was the programming director there, so I wanted to follow in her footsteps.
Hi,
cool.
I'm Kellen. I'm the general manager for WGUR, and I knew coming into college that I just wanted to be part of a college radio station because I thought it was a cool opportunity.
Absolutely.
And then, hi, I'm Aiden McGowan, and I am our station's events and PR coordinator. And I joined WGUR because my really good friend Ansley Kate got involved before I did, and she had nothing but amazing things to say about it, and she got me involved, and now I'm here. So yeah, it's awesome.
My name is Ryan Merchant. I'm the production manager, and I had no interest in radio, and then I walked into this room, and this lady said, "Hey, do you want a free shirt?" And I said, "Sounds great." And then she kept sending me emails for the next 4 months.
Sounds nice.
I'm Cole Alegria, and I'm the videographer for WGUR. And how I first got interested in the radio station was one of my friends invited me to be a co-host on their show. And from there, it's kind of just transformed into me taking on this position.
That's so awesome. Thanks, guys. So I know we had the founders of WGUR come in to speak. So how was it being at the reunion and meeting them and getting to hear what they had to say?
I mean, I can go first. We're filming a documentary with them
Okay.
over our financial side of the radio station and what we're doing to try to stay afloat. So it was very good getting to hear from them and see how tough it was for them to start it and kind of see the parallels between how it's still tough keeping it running today.
For sure.
I really enjoyed meeting them for the first time, especially because I feel like it's so important to know our history as a station, and having that connection with our founders is just something a lot of stations don't have, and being able to hear the real life history from them was really cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. Kellen and I had the privilege actually to interview our founder, Frank, on the air, live on the air, and it was a really great opportunity.
He mentioned that he said out of his 50 years of being here, that was his first time on the air.
Yeah, that was actually my first time on the air too, so me and him had a bond over that.
Very, very bonding moment, yeah. Awesome. Was there anything that they said that very surprised you or just made you grateful for the station today or the future of it?
One of the things they talked about was when you were a DJ back then, you had to get your license from the FCC and apply for it and do a lot of training just to be on the air, which is very different from today because it's a lot more lax and it's a lot easier to just go on the air. For us, at least, you have to do some DJ training and then sign a contract, but that is a huge difference.
So moving on to WGUR's present today, how would you describe your station's identity or tone in general?
I think our social media director Camille does a lot to kind of push our station's identity forward with the Instagram, and we've all been kind of working on our website, so it's been pretty cool kind of developing our own genre or identity. Most of the music that we play and most of the shows that we do are all kind of alt indie rock, so it's been cool seeing us cultivate a space.
I'll just say I find it interesting. I feel like we do a lot of variety as well. Being the programming director, I've had a lot of people come to me and they're like, "Hey, I want to do this talk show. Hey, I want to do this show talking about true crime and stuff like that." So I think it's really interesting just being able to see all the ideas that people have and kind of have those approved and just give everybody a chance to express themselves how they want to on the radio.
For sure. I love how I'm hearing there's a lot of diversity in the station. Did you want to build off of that? No?
Yeah, I will say that I think one of the things that I have always loved best about WGUR is how we've always promoted individuality with our DJs and with our practicums and everyone. They're all very much encouraged to speak on things that they want to speak on, play the type of music that they want to play, and not everyone, not even the rest of our DJs, are always going to like all the music that's played on the station, but it's important to let these students express themselves in an authentic way, which is something that WGUR has always done a good job at, I think.
Yeah, I feel kind of to add on that, I know throughout the years that I've been on exec, I know we've had a lot of people be oh, well, we don't like the music that you guys play. And it's well, it's a radio station. It's not just for you to play music you like. It's a community space where everyone can play what they want to play or talk about what they want to play. So and it's not, I don't know, for me at least, it was the radio station is meant to broaden your horizons, at least in my opinion. So when people are oh, well, I don't like what you're playing, it's well, why don't you just try? and like listen.
No, for sure. That kind of leads me to my next question of like, how do you guys keep students like engaged and like encourage them to like tune in? Because I know, I mean, radio today, it's like you're competing with like Apple Music and Spotify and all of that. So what's like the biggest like push factor that you guys have to like encourage students to tune in?
I would say that through like the events and stuff that we do outside of just our radio shows, we try to build a good sense of community through those events. Obviously, we host concerts and stuff when we can, which is a lot of fun. And people always really enjoy those. But at the same time, we also try to provide opportunities for like the DJs and our practicums and all of us exec to like come together and hang out and like bond in a more authentic and like individual and personal way, rather than just like, oh, we're all part of this club and we don't really know each other. Like we try to provide opportunities like Jeopardy nights or craft nights, or we're gonna have a movie night coming up soon and that kind of thing to like promote that community within WGUR.
I think just building off that as well, with the training that we have our DJs shadow experienced DJs before they can have their own show. And I think the goal with that is not only for them to learn the skills they need to be on the radio, but it's also for them to kind of get that sense of community and start meeting other people. And hopefully it's like, okay, well, I shadowed your show, so I want to listen to it, even when I'm not on it. So that's kind of the goal.
So being a part of exec, what are a few things that you don't like? What are a few things that you think people don't realize goes into like running a station like this, or what are some challenges that you don't think people, faculty, staff, students, community in general realizes go behind the scenes?
I would say, just to like kick it off, that just the attention to detail in so many different ways. Like we have to sign up for my specific role. We have permits that we apply for that I didn't even realize that there were these permits before I got this job. Like there are just always little details and things that need to be taken care of. Ryan is very like detail oriented, and he has to be. That's like part of his job. But I would say just like the very minute attention to detail that we have to pay to like how we promote our events, how we plan the events, how the events sound, how the music sounds, that kind of thing. There's a lot of time and effort and discussion that goes into that people might not realize.
I think kind of building on that, like it takes, I mean, everything takes money, but like it takes a lot of money to run a radio station. Like, especially for us, like we get all of our SABC funding from the school from student tuition and everything, and then I think it's like maybe 3/4 of it, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think like 3/4 of it goes to our operational costs, which is not the case for most like clubs and organizations. So a lot of our budget goes to just maintaining our antenna and paying our FCC dues and all of our like legal fees. So it's like most of our budget we're having to like fundraise for, which is why we ticket our events and stuff. And then with the events, for me at least for I've gotten a lot of really good help from some students this year, but the last like 3 years I've been doing this by myself, like setting up all these events that we do, and everybody loves the events, but I've been doing them by myself for years. So I we have a concert that starts at 8 and I show up at 3 o'clock and I'm lifting heavy stuff for 5 hours prior.
Yeah. So from the WGUR reunion with Frank and Greg, how, based off what you guys heard from like them and like what you see now, how do you think the station has evolved just in general, and like even in just the past year, how do you think you've seen it evolve?
I would say something that I heard Frank and Greg both mention about all of our student media organizations is how impressed they were and how happy they were to see how many women have stepped into roles over the years. And like he was literally saying, if you look through the archives, they've been working really hard on trying to like curate a list of all the GMs that we've had from the very beginning, and you can see over time there's a shift of more and more of our general managers over the years have been women. And they said that was a really big change that they noticed. And like obviously as a woman, I'm super proud of that too. Like heck yeah, women in radio.
I mean, yeah, 3 in the last 3 years.
For me, at least, not as big as a shift from like 1975 to now, but in the past 4 years I've been involved with the radio since I joined in fall of 2022. We've definitely seen a lot more DJs, which is really good. We've gotten a lot more involvement, and I think we started doing like our house concerts in 2023. And those have definitely helped us like gain popularity on campus.
Yeah, because I joined like WGUR as like a freshman, 2023, and I didn't know that that was the first year you guys did that. That's awesome. You learn something new every day. So we kind of like touched on this like a bit earlier about how new media today, like TikTok, podcasts, all of that, is competing a lot with radio. How do you guys like manage it? You kind of touched on how you like keep people engaged in the radio, but how do you guys like personally feel like it is competing with new media today?
I would say it is hard because obviously, especially with like short form content like TikTok and stuff, and also the way that these different social medias influence people's like taste in music, I think we've lost a lot of individuality in people's like tastes in music because they're just consuming what they consume and what's pushed to them by these algorithms. But I think the biggest thing that you can do is try to like embrace it and work with it, because part of my job is to like create some fun interactive videos and make sure that WGUR is being presented and promoted not only just like in a good positive light, but in a way that's enticing to college students. And so you have to embrace like the TikTok and the Instagram and the Snapchat to be able to do that. And it can be hard, but I don't think it's something that we necessarily have to compete with. It's something that we have to learn to use to our advantage.
Yeah. Kind of going back to what Ryan said about all of like the funding and how expensive it is to like run a radio station. If you guys had unlimited resources, like anything you could think of, what would you want to implement in the radio? What would you want to just have for WGUR? Anything. You have unlimited resources.
I'm going to go first and just say, and I'm sure they're all going to say it, but if we could have a different computer system, a better computer system, that is the bane of our existence. So I would definitely say if we could fix our computer system and just the whole renovation of the studio, that would be phenomenal.
No, for sure, I understand.
I think I actually have something a little bit different.
Oh, okay.
I would go back to having like physical media in our station and having like a record player or a CD player or something like that, because right now we are fully digital, and so that's super fun and cool and accessible for DJs. But I see so many photos of other stations that have just walls lined with records, and I want that for us. And we used to have that, but we haven't for a couple of years now.
Like, kind of to add on to Kellen's thing is like the only time we do like an analog form of shows is for Vinyl-thon every year, and like one of us has to like bring our own record players to like put in, and then I have to install it in there. So it's like it would be nice to have a record player built in there.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So obviously you guys are like the leaders of WGUR, and that's so awesome. How are you guys preparing like the next generation of WGUR? Because I know we have some seniors in the room, and how is it being current leaders to prepare future leaders?
Sorry, y'all. I feel like I'm talking so much. I would say that every year, every semester, really, all of us, for the most part, take practicum students, and a lot of them are other mass comm students. But we also get a lot of interest from people who are DJs or people who maybe aren't even DJs but are just interested in getting some event planning experience, some audio production experience, that kind of thing. And so it's been really So it's been really encouraging to see like all these people that are younger than us that are excited about radio and are doing a very good job and like sort of learning the steps that it takes to keep it going. And so I feel very confident in the people that are sort of going to take over after us, I guess.
I know you got like a line of people.
Yeah, so going off of the practicums and the volunteers, I have a lot, or I'd say probably around 5 people, all very involved in the video and editing process, and they're not seniors. Some of them are, but most of them aren't, and kind of just getting them prepared to take on the workload that is video and editing for concerts or just any kind of video in general. That's getting them ready to handle it, I feel.
I think it's really important to like show the passion that like you have for the position that you currently like are over to, because speaking as somebody who joined this a little bit late into the game, seeing the passion that the like previous directors had, and even all of you guys, Kellen, Ryan, all the people who were on exec board before me, just seeing like how into it they were, how much they loved it, really made me want to join as well.
I also think it's really important to be a very active face in your organization, and, you know, building those relationships within WGUR, with incoming DJs, and knowing their name, and just talking to new members is so important, because that's how you can kind of know who would take the position on after you and train them a little bit.
Yeah, definitely showing up and showing out. Yeah. Well, from its founders to the current WGUR team, it's clear that WGUR continues to thrive and evolve with each generation of students. This is the Cat Talk. Tune in next Thursday for our regular news show at 4 p.m. on NBC TV4 through the CableCast app. And we're not on air, we can keep you up to date on our social media. That's at GC360 News on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and at bobcatmultimedia.com/GC360. Always available to you where news comes full circle. See you next week, and thank you guys so much for coming out.